getting us all snacks. You do realize that, right?
That's right.
I'm resident call for YouTube, and I promise I can't guarantee to keep control during this podcast. Joining me, um, Christen Pierce Cara will be with us later. Gordon Dymowski, Patrick McCray, my friends are here to talk Dark Shadows, not just time travel, but parallel time. So here's a question for each of you, and we'll start with Christine. What's your favorite and least favorite thing about time travel, and what's your favorite thing and least favorite thing about parallel time?
Least favorite or favorite?
Both.
Okay.
Favorite and least.
Favorite. Okay, well, let's just go this way. Favorite method of time travel on this show?
Sure.
Was the staircase, like by far margin. I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Favorite thing about time travel is, when they go back to change things, a lot of the time they can't, because it's something that is like a moment that seems set in time. And a lot of the time, like 1795, there was nothing Vicky could do to change that. Things went exactly the way that they were supposed to. And so that was one of my favorite things. My least favorite, I'm having a really hard time coming up with one. Like I loved it all. I love time travel. That's what makes me giddy and happy is time travel. But I will think on it. But
Gordon?
Okay. I would say my favorite method of time travel was the I Ching, because it's a real thing that you could presumably go out and like buy a set of I Ching ones and do that. And I'm sure all the kids in the 60s were doing that, trying to go back to, get the answers for that big test, or, catch the previous episode. I think one of the things I liked about time travel on Dark Shadows is that most time travel is usually either an accident, or it's like hey, we got a time machine, let's just do that, but we dare not change anything. And in Dark Shadows, the intention is, yeah, we got to figure out what's going on. We need to change something. And the fact that someone goes into the past, it's an old quantum physics rule, the observer affects the observed. So Garbus goes back in time, shenanigans happen.
Do you have a least favorite thing, or?
Least favorite thing about time travel? No, I don't think there's. It's kind of hard because Dark Shadows really didn't. I mean, it wasn't a time travel show, but it didn't really mess it up. It kind of like, I think it was just they used time travel as a story device really well.
Patrick?
So, thing about time travel, or method of time travel, because I've seen both. So Joel, what are you looking for here from me?
What's your most favorite thing about? What's your favorite method of time travel? But also, what's your favorite thing about it, and what's your least favorite thing about time travel itself?
So I think either the time staircase, because that allowed people who did not have waiting receptacles to go back in time, back and forth. It democratized time travel. So that certainly works. But if you do have a waiting body back there, I think the whole I Ching method has a lot of fascinating implications that sort of our consciousness is this, pre-existing continuum, and that you can hop back and forth on it. I think it's a really fascinating notion. It could certainly be used, microscopically by humans also, just within the sphere of their lives, which I guess is kind of a quantum leap thing. I never saw the show, but it's what I understand kind of exists, that, he can only travel within his lifetime. So all of that works. So my favorite quality about it is that it expands the show. It expands the show past the present, because a haunted show is going to be dealing with the past. And the advantage that ghosts and goblins and things like that have is that they got all their stuff done in the past, and we're just dealing with the echoes, the reverberations. And it immediately puts humans on the wrong end of a power dialectic. And so this changes that. It's like, oh yeah, well, we can go back and do whatever we want. We can change things or not change things. I think the fact that, two things about Vicki Winters. For one thing, there was nothing purposeful about what she did. There was nothing willful about what she did. So no, she's really not going to be able to change anything. I think partly because of her attitude. I think maybe if Vicki had decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it, then there would have been a greater sense of purpose. But, she's as hapless as she ever was. I know that we're all supposed to really like Vicki.
I love Vicki.
I know you do, Jewel, but Vicki has challenged dropping pennies. Sometimes she couldn't straighten out a rope. So, she would get stuck in a revolving door for a week. And God bless her, because she's there to not understand for the rest of us, because honestly, we don't understand either. So that makes it okay.
Yeah, Jewel, no one will ever use Victoria Winters and intellectual firepower in the same sentence.
I think in defense of Vicki, though, too, in many ways, like before she comes back to her present day time, they're sort of doing, when she goes back to 1795, they're sort of doing the Wizard of Oz trick in 1795, where she's looking at everybody like from her own timeline, as she should, because we've talked, okay,
she needs to grab a bucket and go after Angelique in that case.
She does, but in the same sense too, we've talked about how Catherine Heritage Collins is a doubting Thomas about the room, right? Well, Vicki at first is a doubting Thomas that she's back in time. And why shouldn't she be? It's not like she's done it before.
Exactly. She didn't ask to. She didn't plan the trip. Yeah.
Right.
So it's to be expected that Vicki's not going to change anything. Barnabas, on the other hand, he's been primed with the time trap flashback sequence to see that he can affect the timeline. And even though he doesn't go back in time on purpose at first, he just wants to talk to Quentin and thinks that's all he's going to be doing. He nonetheless is ready. It's like, oh, I've done this before. And it's a less stupid form of time travel than, well, I'm just going to hang around this tombstone and see if something happens. That makes Christopher Reeve in Somewhere in Time look like an engineer for the Rand Corporation working out some precise, machinery. I love that sequence. It's probably my favorite time travel sequence on the show. It's the least remembered, but it's the tightest. That should have been House of Dark Shadows. That's your Dark Shadows movie. Mm-hmm. But he just kind of stands around and then he's back there. It's sort of like don't stand too close to someone who was Josette but wasn't, standing near a portrait of Josette and an open fire. Because not only will they be sucked back in time, but you'll be sucked back in time with them, which is what happens at the end of 1897. Another just sort of inexplicable, why are we back in time? Because Sam Hall wants it, which is a perfectly decent method. I'm sure if Sam Hall, before he died, had said, I want Patrick to go back to 1977, by God, I'd be wearing bells. I'd be back there right now. So I love all of that. The other interesting thing in time travel, I don't know if I can get into stuff I just openly dislike, I don't know. But one of the really wacky things on Dark Shadows that I like, it's just a rule that they have, is that somehow all of the years line up. And there's no leap year. There's no such thing like that. So the same date in 1967 is going on, in 1897 is going on, in 1777, that, you know, if somebody writes a note saying, I'm in big trouble, I'm in a jail, you need to get me out, that you will find it that day. It somehow is time critical, and it will work. I think Stokes even talks about that at one point, that these timelines kind of line up and run parallel. And I mean, it makes no sense, but, you know, neither does a vampire. So this is not the time to be talking, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing worthy of exploration.
My favorite thing, again, I don't have a least favorite thing either. So my favorite thing is Barnabas standing by the gravestone, and he just wheels himself back.
Sure.
You're welcome somewhere in time, because they took from this in every way. I really like the fact that he does this. 1897 is just pure fun. I mean, the fact that my favorite thing about 1897, Angelique telling Barnabas, you can't change anything, just go back. And guess what? In many ways, she's right.
You made it.
Hi, guys. Sorry for my lateness. I'm here. I'm ready.
Here was my question, and this one's to you, Cara. What's your favorite and least favorite thing about time travel and method of time travel?
My least favorite is probably... Let's start with my favorite. That's easier. I will say my favorite has always been the staircase, in a way of going back. That has always been my favorite. I've always been fascinated with it. My least favorite...
That's what I said too.
Is it?
Staircase is what I said too.
My least favorite, it's a little tricky because, I mean, time travel is so cool. And I'm like, I'll have to think about my favorite.
That's what I said too.
If it wasn't the staircase, it would have been I Ching, for sure. But yeah, as far as my favorite, that's how that goes.
Here's a question, and Patrick, I thought of you when I thought of this. So our buddy Patrick McCray's theory is that that Joshua Collins may have been a member of the Leviathans.
It's a speculation.
Well,
I want to hear this.
Over this.
It is.
David Collins could sue me over his allegations, you know, regarding the family. But he's David Stockbridge now. I think that's what he's calling himself, because, you know, he doesn't like connection.
So here's a fun question going off of that, in a sense. Does Joshua realize that his son keeps coming back into time? And if yes, does he tell the Leviathan somehow?
Wow. It'd be cool. I mean, if I found that out, it'd be cool. I don't know if there's any evidence in the text, but we can speculate. I think it would be cool if that were going on. There's nothing to say it's not.
The fun thing about Dan Curtis is that I feel like he always leaves like a little bit of empty space and loopholes for you to leave it up for your interpretation. So it's always fun to think what if.
Who cares, Sam? Let them figure it out themselves. I don't know.
Pretty much.
Give me that 9 iron.
Maybe let's look at it from a different standpoint. It's Joshua who changed Barnabas in the coffin. Maybe instead of Joshua knowing that, hey, look, Barnabas is showing up back in time, he's telling the Leviathans, look, you know, you ever need like a hand grenade or like, you know, a smash glass in case of an emergency, you got a vampire on your hands.
Yeah.
They should have been nicer to him then.
Yes.
The question that I ask, and I didn't really ask it, I didn't look so much into it simply because, you know, the Leviathans are the Leviathans, and I'm sure, I feel like there's so much about them we didn't know. And my question has always been, how did they know about Barnabas? How did they know that he was a vampire? How did they know that, you know, Josette was waiting for him in 1795? Like, where did they get their information? So if Joshua really was a Leviathan, he could have been the mole. So going on that theory.
Well, not only that, if they have so much omniscience, couldn't they have seen that this would all just blow up in their faces?
True.
Why here? Why now? Why these people? Of all the people in America, on Earth, them. It's at the Collins family. Like, they have problems enough as it is.
A theory, it just popped into my mind, but maybe they could have known through, what was Angelique's husband's name? Sky
Rumson.
Maybe, because I know Angelique wasn't really aware of it as well with Sky being a part of them, but she could have told him stories and maybe alluded to it, and Sky could have maybe delivered the message to the Leviathans, maybe.
Well, yeah, there's some pieces of evidence that we definitely have. The Leviathan altar is on the Collins estate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means that they are somehow, if not tied to each other, they're in the same place at the same time.
Yes.
So, Oberon and Haza, there's nothing telling us they aren't observing things. And in fact, Nicholas Blair is an associate, so Diabolos is kind of crossed in with them somehow. You know, they're work associates or contractors for him, or something like that. So Nicholas Blair has all this intel. Although Nicholas Blair is justifiably, wigged out when Jeb makes Barnabas a vampire again. You did what? So
Right.
he's not going to be saying, "Hey, this is the guy," or if he is, this is the guy, but don't make him again, because that's
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I thought about Nicholas being.
I forgot about Nicholas.
yeah.
Good point.
I've had a theory about the whole why Leviathans kind of know everything, and it's kind of a little different. I wonder if the Leviathans, they may not exactly see the future, but they can sense possibilities. Like they might look at,
Absolutely.
because they've got that book that they're always relying on, so they can kind of sense, okay, well, we can't quite go this way, we can't quite go that way, we've got to go straight, and that's why they have everything in that book, and that's why Jeb messed it all up, because he's like, oh, screw the book. Basically he's a 10-year-old in an adult's body. He's like, gimme.
He's an evil Billy Batson.
Yeah.
He is. Now, I have a totally unrelated question. Just imagine, it's not even a question, it's just my excuse to talk. Just imagine Dark Shadows Jeopardy, but the host is Professor Stokes. However, the three contestants are Sky Rumson, Julianka, and Vicky Winters. Okay, continue.
I rest my case.
Or Adam. Early Adam. And he ends up winning. You have Adam.
Did Saturday
Istvan,
Night Live
and
do a
the Hand.
sketch like that, except with
They
Alex
did.
Trebek? With Will Ferrell's
It's
Alex Trebek?
it's my riff on that. Yeah, you could also have Istvan, you have Istvan, Early Adam, and the Hand, Patofi's hand, that can ring in, but that's all it can do.
Or you've got Patofi's hand, the head of Judah Zachary, and Harry Johnson.
Dang.
The head keeps trying to answer, but I can't ring it.
Yeah.
Harry thinks he has a pretty good shot that day. Pretty good shot. They still can't hear Judah from the isolation booth he lives in. It's like a quiz show all the time.
The first instance of time travel we get in Dark Shadows is the seance that leads back to 1795. Victoria is sitting there. They're conducting a seance to contact the ghost of Sarah Collins, sister of Barnabas, and they do get her, but this lights go out. Vicky is gone. Phyllis Wick is here. Time is frozen. So what did you think about the first time travel event in DS history? Ladies?
It was fun to watch and wonder how they were going to do it. Like, were they going to pause time while it was going on? Was it going to be like parallel time? But when we saw that Julianka was just like that, or excuse me, Phyllis Wick was right there. And then we jumped immediately to 1795 for how many episodes? And then when they finally gave us just a blink of back into the present, we realized that it was just paused, and that was really interesting. Because no time had passed, and like they were just frozen there. Like, but we didn't get to know that until like 25 episodes later or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was fun to see later on when they went to parallel time that it was two different things that he was trying to do, which totally made sense, and I liked it because we got to play with parallel time as well. So I liked it.
I didn't quite grasp what was happening at the seance. Like, Vicky screams, the lights go out, and then the lights come back on, and there's this weird woman sitting there. And what just happened? You know? And Vicky's outside, and I'm asking the questions that Vicky's asking. Where is she? Why is she outside? Why is she at the old house? And then, you know, it took me a minute too to realize, oh, like when she saw Barnabas, I was like, oh, watch out, he's gonna get you. But he wasn't a vampire. He was just you know, human and Barnabas. You know? But blew my mind.
Yeah.
Gordon?
Yeah, it was surprising because the way they handled it was you would expect that in a scene like that, it would be someone would come and say, here's the story about how all this happened. And, you know, not even, and at that point, Barnabas had just been through the cure and was like, oh my God, I hope nobody figures out I'm the vampire. And I think doing it does a couple of things. One, it kind of, it just throws a curveball at the audience because now they have even more reason to watch. It's like, we're all in a different time period. You get, the actors were probably relieved that, oh wait, you're not hiring new people to do these roles. You want us to do them. You know, like Joe Carruthers was probably like, oh, Joe Haskell's boring, but Nathan Forbes, yeah, I can sink my teeth into this.
Polar opposites. Yeah.
Yes.
Job security.
That was always one of my favorite parts of Dark Shadows too, is that they would reuse the main actors. It's kind of like American Horror Story feel. Like, it just makes it that much more exciting for them as actors and for us as the viewers.
Absolutely.
Like, I think it makes it more exciting.
I agree.
So,
Sorry.
Nathan Forbes. Nathan Forbes was a part for which Joel Carruthers admirably filled the breaches. No, he truly was an outstanding member of the cast in that sequence in every way. And Louis Edmonds really giving him a run for his money early on too. And that's all I have to say about 1795. But beyond that, I used to wonder what these feelings were, but also I wondered, like, who is responsible for this time travel thing? And my guess, and of course, you know, none of this works with the actual writing of the show. It's all looked at in retrospect. My guess is that it's Sarah. It's one of the reasons we don't see Sarah again, is that she really burns herself out with this time travel thing. But what it ultimately is, it's two things. It's because she knows she can't keep appearing. It takes energy every time she does it. And she's waiting for the right combination of things to occur so that she can appear. She's not appearing in 1840. She's not appearing in 1897. It's when she senses Barnabas is coming that she starts to establish herself as a presence. And she says, the dead are angry, the dead are angry. Well, the only, you know, I used to think, well, maybe she's talking about Judah Zachary or Ghost of Quentin. But no, the only angry dead person I see around here, Sarah, is you.
It's Sarah.
Yeah, it's Sarah. Because when she appears to Barnabas, she says, I'm angry with you. She comes right out and says it. And so I think she knows that a couple of things are going on. She has to make Vicky Winters the surrogate Sarah. There has to be an accountability mechanism on Barnabas to work some good old-fashioned guilt on him. Somebody has to know. And she knows Barnabas is too good to just, you know, kill her to keep his secret. He's not going to do that. She can't be around forever. So Vicky can do the job that Sarah couldn't. And by taking Vicky back in time, not only does Vicky see exactly what Barnabas is, but also she gets to know Sarah, and that Sarah and Sarah's needs and wants become important to her. And so she will want to follow through that, vaguely articulated mission. Why? Well, she wants to save her brother's soul, for one thing, and return him to being the man he was, someone who is good, not just someone who does good. But the other thing is she knows Angelique is coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Angelique basically, killed her, was responsible for her mother's death, was responsible for her brother's death, was just a pestilence in her life. I mean, there's no one that Sarah could have greater wrath for than Angelique. But she can't touch Angelique. But she can prepare everybody for the war. And that, I think, is what this is.
It's a good point, because like you said, making Vicky like the one keeping Barnabas accountable. Like at first, maybe I thought it might be through David, through a child's eyes, like Sarah was trying to show us. Like I thought it could be David. But with Vicky, yes, absolutely. We saw it work with Vicky instead.
I think this counts was that one extra little supernatural kick that Sarah needed, because it opened up the rift and it made the temporal shift take place, know. So
but that burned her out.
Yes, exactly. That temporal shift is probably what did it.
And really, she's, like you said, she's not just preparing Barnabas, she's preparing everybody, including Victoria Winters, who says about Angelique. And also, prior to that, when you look at the episode in the Mausoleum, I think it's 363, where Dr. Julia Hoffman hears a woman weeping and hears a wicked woman laughing. The wicked woman laughing is Angelique. To your point, Patrick, Angelique is coming. That's our hint. She's coming. Is the laughter. Though it's not Laura Parker's legendary laugh, but it is Angelique in itself. So our next point of time travel is Barnabas willing himself back in time to save Vicky's butt. He unfortunately decides to somewhat trust Angelique, I'll say loosely. What did you think of this? Very interesting standpoint, because Angelique puts Vicky under a spell, and once they burn the witch, him and Ben, which I love that scene, Vicky wakes up. What did you think of this, ladies?
Well, we've already established that it's very Christopher Reeve the way he goes back, because Christopher Reeve willed himself too, suggested it into his mind, and it, But this whole thing with Vicky, going back to save Vicky and trusting Angelique, I was irritated with Barnabas. It's like, really, you trusted her? I mean, but this is the first encounter that Barnabas in 1966, 7, whatever it is. This is his first encounter with Angelique since becoming a vampire. So, I mean, a little bit I can forgive it but I don't. She put a curse. The last time you talked to her, she was putting a curse on you. She turned you into this vampire that you're cured of, by the way, but now you have to go back to it because you went back to save Vicky. Yeah. So first of all, I don't know why he trusted her. And
I think I can tell you why he might have. Okay. And that is that sequence where she gets horribly aged. I think, is Nicholas the one who does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
is it Sam?
Sam does it initially with the painting, but Nicholas ends up aging her permanently, and he goes, "You have to go to Barnabas and convince him to love you," and that doesn't happen.
But I think
that's right.
That scene where she is throwing herself at his feet.
Yeah.
And he is so cold towards her.
Disconnected.
I think it's cold towards her. I think that's the affectation. And because he's making himself. I think his natural inclination probably would be, oh God, yes, of course, let's figure this out. But then he stops himself. He says, no, this is who I have to be. This is who I am. I can't love her.
Right.
But I think the guilt of that really stays in the back of his mind. And in the whole Cassandra thing, as horrible as she is, he sees that she exists in a context. Barnabas doesn't exist in a context in that he is not a dynastic vampire. There was no master vampire that made him one. He is not a Padawan to anyone. There's nothing like that. And so, he is truly a Ronin in the supernatural world. And so there's no real answerability. And he sees that Angelique does exist in a context, and it probably makes him wonder, what sacrifices has she had to make?
Yes.
Hey, now I've seen all these different dimensions of her. Maybe, just maybe, and it's the humanity of it all. Maybe this time I can reach her. In my personal life, I deal with terrible people all the time. And I think maybe this time, all of the other times were flukes. Maybe this time. And no. But you know what? Every bad person who turns their life around had someone who gave them that last chance one more time. And for those people, they finally took it. And so, and that's a terrible bargain to deal with in life. And Barnabas deals with it, but Barnabas gets to have it both ways.
Yeah.
Rarely is there a Ben Stokes in life with a torch on the other side of the door waiting to say, "Burn, witch." And like, Angelique, so you did screw me after all. Well, guess what's behind door number 1?
Yeah.
Go find it out.
Very true.
Well, and overall, like, going back to Sarah for a minute, like, because she was so angry, especially with Barnabas, like, those are those kind of moments out of Barnabas, like letting Angelique, just letting her play it out and kind of giving her a chance to see where she's going to take it. But what Sarah was fighting so much for was who Barnabas was at his core. And that shows throughout the whole show, like giving Angelique a chance, or, like,
Sure,
that's
who he is.
In him, like,
Yeah.
And I think that's why Sarah was so angry, because Barnabas, I know who you are. This is not who you are. And
Good point.
And I think he was so gracious with Angelique. He let her say it herself. Like, he would badger her. Why are you lying? Why are you lying?
Yeah.
But he just let her do it herself.
Yeah.
Until she did come to him, and he was like, okay. But like, she was like, yeah, I'm Angelique, this and that. And he was like, okay, go on.
True.
And just let her do it herself. But yeah, you're right, Patrick.
Gordon?
Well, I'm kind of in agreement with everyone here. I do think I do think that the series had tried to be consistent with time travel, except for the whole Barnabas going back in time. And I think that at that moment, was part of his arc with Angelique. It's one of the critical pieces that leads him to 1840 and the full-on apology. Because in 1897, that the Cassandra, he's starting to see she exists in the context. 1897 is the, working out the, you do realize that you did this to me because I wasn't quite ready, or, I didn't quite feel for you. So I think that's part of the piece where that's how you get to the final Barnabas Angelique scene in 1840 before Trask shoots her.
Excellent point.
Yeah. He gets Vicky out of the situation, him and Ben do, and she rides off into the sunset, if you will, into the past sunset with Peter Bradford, aka Jeff Clark. So our next time travel is, Quentin Collins, the Curse of the Werewolf. And what an arc. The I Ching, they used the I Ching wands, which are Quentin's wands, apparently, in the arc, which I like. They used the hexagram of change has to line up for Barnabas to send his astro body back. He has to have a body to go to. He does have a body to go to. My favorite part, though, is the fact that Julia went back and she was kicking ass.
That
was a shining moment for her.
She just goes, and she's invulnerable.
Yeah.
She didn't have a body back then.
She's the real Superman of 1897.
Yes.
What an advantage.
Yeah.
So, ladies, what did you two think first? Yeah.
I Ching. Okay. I have done research on I Ching, and literally it's over my head. Literally, like, no matter how often I read it, it's still way over my head. But the fact that they use something like that to conjure up time travel, and it wasn't the first time either. You know, I mean, the last time they went back in time, Julia found the staircase, of course. Well, Barnabas couldn't find the staircase, so he, you know, used the I Ching wands just as you know, he's about to strangle Julia in 1790.
The thing about the I Ching is, like, it's like playing Russian roulette. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know if you're gonna get this.
I mean, you throw it down, can you pick it back up and throw it again?
Or are you stuck with your choice and you got to follow through? Like, it's the most
cheats.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Rearranges them once they're out there.
Oh, hold on. Okay,
Yeah.
that looks good.
I mean, Count Patofi did the same thing. You know, he was like, "Oh, I'm not going to throw them here. I'm just going to arrange them in the way that I need to arrange
They
them."
made it
you
look
know?
much easier than it really is. And
Like, then why have all of the other 7 hexagrams if that's the one you need? You know,
Because they are mythologically inaccurate with the I Ching.
Yeah.
There's nothing about time travel with the I Ching. It's a divination tool. That's it.
Yeah. He's right. I've tried to time travel with the I Ching, and it never works.
No.
I also tried to cast spells by building a house of tarot cards and lighting them on fire. That
doesn't work either.
Dark Shadows lied to us.
I know. I'm really disappointed because I'm still hoping they figure out time travel before I'm dead. And it's just, I Ching let me down. Dark Shadows let me down. I'm sad.
So the one that's really worked the best is probably seances.
Yeah, or the staircase.
Well,
I think
I don't have
find out.
I have one at my place, but it's not magical.
Doesn't take me anywhere but home.
It takes me to home, and that's magical enough, I guess. But
yeah, but I Ching, I mean, it's very freaking interesting. It's very interesting. But they made it too.
And I think too, Dark Shadows was looking for a way to get people back into the past that was slightly metaphysical, that wasn't dependent on here's our magic machine, or here's our magic spell that takes us back. And I think I think the one nice thing about the reason why I like the I Ching is that it's based on randomness. I mean, Philip K. Dick used the I Ching as a way to write Man in the High Castle, because it's all about what is authentic and what kind of permutations there are. And I think I don't think that they're that high level. They just saw, a bunch of black wands with white markings. This is cool. Oh, this is called I Ching. Let's use this. And I think the fact that there's that hint of randomness about it, that it's not necessarily okay, we need to figure out, we got to get back to this place, this time, at this particular moment.
Yeah, instead of come on 7, come on 7. No, come on hexagram of change and just roll the I Ching wands instead of roll the dice.
It's not gonna work.
I really
tried a seance, and I still haven't tried willing myself back. So I'm still holding out for those.
I've got wands. I've got I Ching wands.
The most powerful thing is the mind.
Yeah.
Is the who?
The mind.
The mind.
Oh, sure.
You're trying to go anywhere. I think it's all up to you.
What did kids all think of Angelique's warning to Barnabas in 1897? Go back. You can't change anything. Nothing you do will help. What did you think of that?
She's just trying to make him dependent on her.
Exactly.
He's gotten a little bit of the mojo. He's figured something out. The old time travel trick.
You can always change the past. You shouldn't, but you can. That's what
yeah.
Change anything.
I just wanted to lord that over him.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can't change it, then why didn't you expect Ben Stokes behind the door? Just saying. with the fire, with the torch.
Do we have to bring up Ben again, Angelique? Do we have to? Because I'll do it again.
I'm down.
Man. Well, and again, Ben's Stokes, Professor Stokes, was the first one that ever in her couple hundred years challenged her like that and made it possible.
I think today, maybe today or yesterday, was the anniversary of that episode.
Cool.
I think I think
I love it. Still makes me grin. Still makes me smile.
I watched it just the other day.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was fantastic as always.
So good. So good.
Gordon?
So we're off topic.
Yeah, I think it was just Angelique was just like messing with Barnabas's head, because when you think about it, the fact that Barnabas actually showed up in the past, look what actually happens. You know, he takes on Sandor and Magda. Quentin is presumably saved from death. You have and as that storyline goes on, you have Quentin not only not dying but becoming an immortal, becoming a werewolf and then becoming an immortal.
Yeah.
Which is double painful. I've been there, done that. Don't just kids don't
Don't try this on.
Which wasn't supposed to happen, was it? Like Quentin was supposed to die by Jenny's hand or Beth's hand. I forget which one it is, but that's not what ended up happening. He did change that. You know, time was rewritten.
Yeah,
So,
it's Beth, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because it's Angelique who helps him resurrect Quentin to after Jenny stabs Quentin. And then Beth is supposed to kill him, and then Patofe stops that, which is really interesting. Let me tell you who benefited from 1897 the most. Mr. Best, Death. He owes Barnabas the biggest thank you card ever that is long overdue.
True. So much death.
Really good.
This is his finest earner. This is foxiest earner. Mr. Best indeed. But
I guess I'll be the one that defends Angelique's words on this podcast. And here's why I say this. Barnabas is not just going back to figure out the werewolf curse. He's going back to also, in a sense, find a cure for Chris.
Yes.
Now, we do get Charles Delaware Tate in this arc, which it's Julia Hoffman who helps find Charles Delaware Tate in the future, and he's aged. I love the robot feature, by the way, too, the head that rolls off the body.
Oh, I know.
So good. It's so good. It's just, the show has gone insane at that point. They had to get kind of dreary and realistic, because if they had kept going in that direction, it just would have become some weird filmmaking experiment after a while. Strange numbers and shapes and people climbing through stacks of tires, waving flashlights in the air. Yeah, I mean, it was headed towards someplace really wacky.
It would have been like Green Acres, but more serious, basically.
Yeah.
Because it was going. And I'm not knocking Green Acres, by the way.
No, I don't think you are. The pilot to Dark Shadows episode 1 to me reminds me a lot of Green Acres. Because you have somebody from New York, very sophisticated, comes to a small town where, you know, she has certain expectations of an idyllic life, and instead it's just this weird internalized chaos that she can never, just like Oliver Douglas, she can never quite understand. And that makes Mitch Ryan Ava Gabor.
Yeah.
Metaphor right there.
Yeah, I'm not the first to make the Gabor-Ryan connection.
Our next time travel is Quentin's Staircase, or actually 1995. What did you, coming back from Parallel Time, which we will get into Parallel Time here soon, I promise. So what did you think of the Dark Shadows Goes to the Future, ladies?
Completely unexpected because of where they just were.
Yeah.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Completely unexpected from where they just were, because they went back to the room and they expected to go back to their own time, but they didn't. So now we're to wonder, was this night? I mean, I'm sorry. Let me back up. We don't know if it's 1995 of parallel time. We don't know if it's 1995 of regular time. And when they go back through time through the staircase, we don't know if they're going back to parallel time or if they're going back to their usual time. And it is just,
honestly, they probably don't know either.
It is just a big ball of, you know what? You know what I'm saying? And nobody knows what's going to happen. And it kept me on the edge of my seat. I loved it, you know?
Like my first reaction, funny, because I was watching it in 1995 as a child. Like it was 1995, I was 6 years old. And they all of a sudden jumped to 1995. I was like, okay, they're in our year, they're in our universe. That's how it felt in my childlike eyes.
They're bringing the same air we are.
But I thought it was really cool because all this time jumping, it was all about going back to the past, changing something. But nobody ever thought about jumping to the future,
the possibility
to see what to change.
Right.
You know, like I loved them going to the future.
Yeah.
I hated seeing Collinwood in shambles. That was really sad.
And
the reason it happened, it was it ghosts?
It was Gerard.
Gerard, yeah, it was Gerard. But I thought it was really cool that finally, for once, they jumped forward in time.
Yeah, it was the only time.
And with Carolyn, like pretty much left there, and she's a crazy old bat, telling all the stories that did happen. You're like, really?
But she tells them in riddles. She doesn't just tell them straight up.
Yeah.
Like so many
She's
riddles.
like,
and you know, we're all dying to know what happens. And, you know, we still have 20 episodes before we find out what happened that caused all these ruins at Collinwood. And
she never still really gives a straight answer, like you said.
No, it's all riddles.
Yeah.
And then when she finally agrees to help, it's, you know, it's a riddle, and you know, she dies before she actually gets to tell them, you know. Yeah. And it's just incredible.
Yeah.
She also dies before she gets to see the John Leguizamo 1995 vehicle, The Pest.
True. Yeah.
So there's a payoff. You know, it's kind of like, well, maybe Gerard was trying to prevent that, because we already saw what happened when she saw The Stupids and the Jerky Boys movie and Cabin Boy. And, you know, she was fine before that. 1995 is a strange year for comedy.
She really missed out on that Halloween 6 The Curse of Michael Myers movie, let me tell you.
True.
Gordon.
Yeah, and I think and I've said this on this podcast before, but I think 1995 is not only a really mind-blowing story. I think this is probably as a lead into the 1970 and then into 1840. It really is the beginning of a storyline that basically reminds Barnabas Collins that he is going to fail, because when it ends in parallel time, it doesn't end with parallel time does not end with Barnabas and Julie going, yes, thanks for our adventures, we're going back to. No, they are in the middle of Collinwood's on fire, and they just can't, you know, they need to rescue Roxanne. There's stuff going on. It's literally they leave before the story ends. Yeah, you see Collinwood that is, it's alien. I mean, it's you see the destruction, and there's no real sense of like internal geometry. You know how you can think of the set when you look at it, and you can kind of in your head, the way that the set is created and kind of destroyed, it's very disorienting, and it really gives a sense of what the hell's going on here.
Exactly.
And then when they go to when they get the clues, you know, it's the trope of, you know, the future, you're going to prevent it. Well, Barnabas failed to save Roxanne. He now realizes, okay, at some level he's failed Collinwood. You've got the ghost of Judah Zachary, who has a moment with Julia, and Barnabas realizes, well, he's failed to protect her on some level. Then they go back, every clue, you know, the astrology failed. David and Hallie failed. In fact, when it's time to find the staircase and the zombies come in, it's not Barnabas that rushes down to the staircase, it's Julia.
Yes.
You know, and I think this is probably I'm not going to say it's the greatest time travel story, but I think it's one that really, I think it kind of uses time travel tropes the same way the Velvet Underground uses the same three chords. It's just relentless drive all the way through.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We'd seen many things on Dark Shadows by this point, by 1995. We've seen the blue whale window smashed in by a werewolf. We've seen Barnabas destroy things with his cane. We've seen women be bit. We've seen women be attacked by a werewolf. We've seen heads roll off of bodies. But we've never seen Collinwood destroyed until now.
Yes.
And what a bold risk. And it felt like George A. Romero and John Carpenter were writing and directing Dark Shadows. This was end of the world is here. Because the world we all know is what? Collinwood. That's the world we've been knowing all this time. And it's very scary to see you're all right, Barnabas fail. And when the real realization too is, well, real quick, this is the like you said, this is the beginning, official beginning of the Judah Zachary arc, 1995. But once they come back from 1995, after they getting warnings from Carolyn of what to look for, the signs to look for, and they try to warn everybody, no one's listening to them, and it's all falling on deaf ears. So they don't just get to see the future, go to 1995 and see the future. Yes, that happens, but they get to witness how it unfolds in front of their faces, and there's nothing they can do to stop it.
Yes.
And it's all the too more real, and it makes it holy shit.
It's kind of like the whole reason they've been jumping back and forth through time here is to prevent exactly what they were witnessing at that moment.
Yeah.
And it's just, my God.
The thing that got me most, though, is when they're trying to warn everybody, well, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And they have Quentin, who is on their side, knows all of the secrets. Yeah. There is nothing hidden from Quentin. And they're like, Quentin, we need your help. And he's like, okay, great, I'm on board. But then Quentin gets wrapped into it, and they have no idea until it is too late.
Yeah.
And that's the part that gets me. It was like their one ally that did believe them, that, we need you to help us watch, it just completely fell victim to it too, right under their noses, and they didn't even see it. Yeah. And I mean, that's the part that got me. And
it's kind of like Barnabas with the Leviathans, like he just nobody knew.
Quentin's apology to Barnabas is so like, I'm sorry. I feel like he realizes he's failed him.
Right.
And he's not just him, but the whole family.
Right.
So I tried. I did my best.
Yeah.
Just it's very it's my favorite time travel.
I think it might be mine too. Now, I love 1795, but my favorite is when is this whole 1840 era, but it stretches so far back, and it just it's all leading up to this, and I think that's why the build up alone is
Well, and I think the time travel stories in Dark Shadows deliver a different set of stakes each time, because 1795 is the secret origin of Barnabas Collins, and basically it's why is the girl here, and a little bit of there's a vampire, so there's that threat. In 1897, the Collins family is driven out of Collinwood, so the stake is there's two ghosts, they want to go back, those ghosts have got to go.
Yes.
This arc is basically Collinwood, Barnabas and Julia C. It's the apocalypse. It is basically. I think the fact that having that reminder of failure as a lead into really makes it clear that this isn't just we need a conflict because we have to have a conflict.
Right.
We see the future that Barnabas and Julia sees. We can't help but, we want them to stop it, and even when we're glad that Julia makes it and she's trying to talk to Barnabas, who, hasn't been I Chinged yet.
Yeah.
That Barnabas is like, oh, screw you. Let me go back to the coffin.
Yes.
No, I'd rather be with a cross on my chest and the chains of the no. And then literally talking, President Barnabas each brute forces his way into his head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it's like them getting to witness that firsthand. Like they, like you, when they're watching that firsthand happen in 1995, they're like, as they're watching it as well, they're like, what have we done, or have we done anything to cause this already? When they still need to go back and change some things. Like they're like, have we done something already that made this happen? Do we need to go back and change this too? It's just a cluster F of like what ifs and not changing the past. But when you have to, it's like,
Right.
It's a mess.
Even though they had the clues, they were completely unprepared for what was going to happen when they finally made it back to 1840.
It's all unpredictable.
Even when they made it back to 1970 with their clues, I feel like they were horribly unprepared for that. I mean, all they had were these clues. And they thought because they had these clues, they were going to be all right. They were going to be able to watch out for this. But then they get back to 1840 and they find out it's not even Gerard Stiles, it's Judah Zachary.
Yeah.
And that was the shit kicker for me. I was like,
Gerard
what?
was just a puppet.
That whole story arc
Like,
is
it's
just
not Gerard. He's just a puppet.
It's like, I think I've said it before on your show, Jewel, but when we went back, like Quentin was kind of similar. And when we went back, Quentin was just a guy. He was just a regular old guy. He was a hoe, but he was a guy, But when we went,
ladies, man.
he was. I don't know how he only had 2 kids, but that's a different story. But when we went back to 1840, it was like, oh, Gerard's just a guy. But it's not even Gerard. It's Judah Zachary.
We don't meet Gerard as Gerard, really.
Right. So it's just...
Like, we barely really get to know Gerard at all. Like,
yeah.
Gerard is kind of like the Dame Edna for Judah Zachary's Barry Humphries. It's a drag persona. Yeah. It's a supernatural drag persona.
Yeah.
Back in the box. Back in the box. Yeah.
Well, since we're already on to 1840, which is a nice segue, what did you think of the head of Judah Zachary being brought in by Desmond Collins as a present to Quentin Collins?
It makes you wonder what kind of weird stuff Quentin Collins was into. It's like, oh, I thought he'd really enjoy this head.
What other body parts has he been presented with?
Exactly.
Is that Carl that brought it home?
It was Desmond.
Desmond, sorry. I was getting confused. Desmond.
And this is a symptom of how messed up the family, the Collins family is. One generation after Barnabas becomes a vampire.
Yes.
Daniel is out of it. Edith is a drunk. Gabriel is pretending to be crippled because he wants Daddy to love him. Quentin is the absentee dad who's dabbling in magic. Carl says, hey, you know what I'll give my hypochondriac novelist mother? A severed head in a box. I mean, you can see now why Judah Zachary chose this particular point of time and not think, okay, I'm an immortal. Maybe I should attack them in the future when they don't know who I am, or maybe I should go in, like, I don't know, 1870 because I'm bored.
Yeah, pick a century. But I'll always go back to it. Just my personal belief. I'll always go back to the grounds of Collinwood. I just think it's a hellmouth for that type of stuff to happen. And the Collins is being settled on that land for how many centuries?
That time warp didn't just show up.
I just think it has a lot to do with the land, in my opinion. I just think
I think we have a Quatermass in the Pit style thing here, where there's like a Leviathan power source thing.
It's what happens when you build the house, within walking distance of the Leviathan altar.
Right.
I mean, that pre-exists all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Wait, how long have the Leviathans been around?
Since the beginning
they've been around
of time.
longer than the house before the house was built.
They said since the beginning of time.
Since the settlement, yeah.
That altar was not a double wide put up by Clayton Holmes. I mean, that's not a recent thing.
Yeah.
It's been there a while.
Man.
Yeah, it's not a franchise of Leviathan altars are us,
True.
If you've dealt with those inflatable Leviathan altars, they just
Oh yeah, those are horrible.
Coming soon.
It's
Coming
like, there you
soon.
go.
The Leviathan bouncy house. Just wait.
Well, I think Jeb was very eager to start a Leviathan bouncy house.
So with Desmond presenting, he wants to give Quentin this gift. He learns Quentin's dead. He's very upset. So he keeps the head of Judah Zachary for himself. Why not? You know.
He lost the receipt.
Yeah. And
But
he,
Judah Zachary tries to take Desmond first.
yeah.
You know, he didn't just leap to Gerard's side. It tried to take Desmond first. And Desmond fought it off. And what does that say about Gerard Stiles? I don't know. But,
Well, I have a theory about that.
okay.
That in looking at the episode, usually when there's possession, it's like you've got normal person and then, entity takes over. Because Gerard Stiles, who's really Ivan Miller pretending to be Gerard,
He's
is
not
such
even Gerard.
is such a jerk and a manipulator. I think the implication is that he's the reincarnation of Judah, and Judah's like, okay, this is going to be easy. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's a good.
I will buy that.
Yeah.
I will buy that.
In a lot of ways too, in a sick about way, he has no real identity of his own. So the people Judah Zachary tries to inhabit first, Desmond has an identity. Letitia Faye has an identity.
Yes.
He doesn't. The third, he doesn't. So it's weird to think about it that way, but that's to me how it is. He just doesn't have an identity that he can call his own in a sense.
Well, and if I recall very early, like when we first got there with Gerard, but he kind of voices something kind of on the lines of that, like he wasn't respected until recently. Nobody ever listened to what I had to say until recently.
Until he was Gerard Stiles
in this
and not
house.
Ivan Miller.
Just all of a sudden. But it was probably after obviously his possession that they started paying attention to him and listening to what he had to say. But that kind of came out of Gerard, even if he was being possessed at the time, that he was never really listened to or respected in the house. So
another thing too is this Quentin is, he's related to the 1897 Quentin, so it makes sense that he's into the occult as well.
Yeah.
So we find out, surprise, surprise, Quentin's alive because we can't get along without David Selby. Thank God he's here.
Yes, sir.
I love Quentin here. He gets put on trial. Angela, there's a very cool scene that when they're reading about how Judah Zachary got betrayed, guess who walks into the doors of the old house? Angelique herself.
Oh yeah, she's always there.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite scene of 1840. What's Olivian's, ladies?
Can I go first?
Yes.
Correct my timeline if I'm wrong, because this is where it gets a little blended for me. But when we finally got the scene of Angelique as Miranda on trial, what's his name? Amadeus. Like, it got me thinking, because that came on like at the very end of the show after all we've seen. But that stuck out for me is because was Angelique in it for the Collins family since that trial because of Amadeus? Because he's the one that, sentenced her to death.
Well,
has she been getting the Collins family since then?
He gave her clemency because she against Judah Zachary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite part of that era, was going back to Miranda.
Yeah.
And Amadeus in the courtroom. It felt like it kind of not wrapped up, but in theory explained a lot of things to me.
It did answer some
It's
questions.
like the Angelique's origin.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. What about you?
Oh, sorry. I guess for me, we forget that yes, Barnabas is a vampire for the good majority of 1840, but we've also got Roxanne, who is like a conundrum in herself, who, Barnabas turned And
he's like, it wasn't me, I swear.
yeah, it's like, where did this other, okay,
Yeah.
in present time, you know, she's there and it's like, who turned her? I mean, where did she come from? And come to find out, Barnabas did.
Barnabas did.
And I mean, Angelique via Barnabas did. But
still.
So there's that whole scene where, you know, Randall Drew is keeping her up out of her coffin in the sunlight. And, you know, she was like, I need Barnabas. He's the only one who can help me now. And then all of a sudden Barnabas is, you know, got the heat on him. And Julie was like, they cared about each other. That's, you know, and getting very defensive towards Barnabas. And then Julia almost dying because of Roxanne, because of Angelique's jealousy. Like, that was one of my least favorite parts. Like, it was so frustrating for me that every time that Angelique from back then saw Julia, dear sister-in-law, because she thought that Julia, she was in love with Barnabas, but they weren't together, you know, because Barnabas obviously cared about her in the way that Angelique wanted him to care about her. And
it was like this, like, this jealousy triangle. Like,
yeah.
Gordon, what's your favorite part of 1840?
I think the trial scene with Miranda Duvall, and because you really see, first you kind of see this is how it all like how all of this started.
Yeah.
You also get a sense that, you know, Judah Zachary, for all his powers, has an ego and is really insecure. It's like, dude, of course you're being found guilty. You were a witch. You bragged you were the devil's son.
Yeah.
You know, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. But I think it also suggests that, you know, I think that it talks about how not only how well established the Collins family was, but it makes sense that he's basically on a 300-year vendetta because a Collins stood up to him and said, "Nope, you're guilty of this." You know, basically somebody stood up to him and didn't believe his hype.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about vendettas. We thought Angelique's was bad, you know. I mean, Judah's after, like, Angelique's got nothing on this guy, you know.
It's like, and it's so surprising after all of this that, correct me if I'm wrong again, but an actual Collins didn't really, yes, Quentin was possessing the kid, but like, you would expect this, like, from a Collins to a Collins, the way they stab each other in the back all the time.
Yeah.
But it was always like somebody, like, third party, like Gerard or Judah Zachary or like Angelique, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling, but
the perfect prime example of that is Brutus, who there was no villain. The villain was Brutus. You know, he was the one who cursed his family. You know, it was Collins against Collins because he didn't trust these Collinses he hadn't even met yet. You know, it's just,
if not Brutus, it was maybe Gabriel, but it was really just a vendetta against.
That was so petty. But
I don't know, but yeah.
Patrick, what's your favorite part of 1840?
I mean, the end. The end. I mean, you know, Barnabas and Angelique, and that, you know, she makes him a human again, and he still can't love her, and that's okay. And then he sees what she's capable of, and we see what she gives up. You know, and that they're both at peace with it, and he's robbed of the opportunity to enjoy it. And so it really brings into question, what is a spiritual victory? And are spiritual victories enough? Or is just the word spiritual something we slap on the idea of being virtuous, but ultimately unsatisfying? And just the Shakespearean level of irony to that is magnificent. It is horrible in the best sense. It is, you know, when they used to talk about title things, the terrible tragedy of, and use terrible in that sense, it is a terrible ending in the finest sense. And it's the true apotheosis of Dark Shadows. It's the climax. It's where it's all going. 1841 Parallel Time is an epilogue. It's almost a little it's a parable, you know, that reinforces the theme. It almost tests it at the end, but it's really a separate discussion. And the prime discussion is about Angelique, and that's where all this is coming to. And you know, that the story begins with a strange young woman without a home coming to Collinwood to be a servant, essentially an advanced form of a servant, and that the whole story ends with the advanced form of the servant saving them all, but dying in the process. And there's a symmetry to that I really, you know, because Angelique is truly the anti-Vicky. She understands.
Yes.
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 And I don't want to buddy trail too far, but since you were on that subject, it's like I was talking to Christen a couple days ago about it. But like between like the triangle of Barnabas, Joseph, and Angelique, like because of the way we got to being with Barnabas and Angelique, like it kind of tells you like Angelique was in a perspective the right choice the whole time for Barnabas.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, like as much as we love Josette and how she helped the Collinses, like David and all them after she was gone, like Angelique, like that kind of, she was the right choice the whole time. And I mean, like you said, the Shakespearean feel of it, that's what breaks your heart even more. Like it's like so beautifully tragic.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah.
Before we get it,
She's just a professional victim.
yeah.
That she exists to look pretty and be victimized. And you know, no.
Nicholas is like, if this is what you are, you cannot be this.
Yeah.
Before we get into parallel time, I'm going to go to the seventh circle of hell and defend Brutus Collins. Brutus.
Jewel, you're really taking on defending Dark Horse.
Yeah,
This is a prisoner.
What are you really on?
Who's fighting you on?
You know, Jewel's going to come in and say, I'm going to defend not flushing. Okay. Well, what are you defending now? Let's hear it. We love it. What are you defending?
Listen, I'm punching my ticket to hell after this podcast ends. Anyway, with Brutus, keep in mind that Brutus, he wasn't liked by his sons. Now, for a reason, because he basically hated them all, and they hated him back. The one person who was loyal to him was his sister, but his sister, in her defense, she didn't understand the kind of man he was. She just was a true believer of Brutus of, oh, you're a good person. She was naive to who he really was. And then when her betrayal came, then he cursed every Collins afterwards, because her betrayal was the straw that broke Brutus's back.
Very true. Very true.
So that's my defense of Brutus. It's not much.
Yeah, but the dude should have done what they would have done in that century. Challenge his sons to a duel. You know, 10 paces, pistols at dawn. That's how you do it. You don't put, you know, I could be angry with you for that whole, you know, defending Brutus. I don't say, hey, I'm going to curse you to see the dead bodies in a certain room. I go, hey, Jewel, bare knuckle brawl, cage match, MMA, you and me. You name the time and place, I'm there. That's how you deal with that.
Listen, if we're going to have a wrestling match, let's have my favorite wrestling match, a buried alive match, okay? That's the kind of match we got to have. You know,
No, none of this wrestling stuff. You know, if you're going to fight, we fight for real. 2 men in, 1 man out.
2 men and 1 man. What?
All right. Let's get into parallel time.
That's all I know. Continue.
Let's get into parallel time. So 1970 parallel time, a completely different reality to the one we know. And Barnabas is all too eager to want to go to parallel time because he feels, hey, I won't be a vampire anymore. No, that's not how that works. But I love that he doesn't know how that works because, well, he shouldn't. He's never been to parallel time. Really, and I know that, and Patrick, you've brought this up in your book, the Dark Shadows Day book, that, you know, they're going to babysit the audience because they're going to go off to film House of Dark Shadows at this point too. But
Yeah.
I really love how they set up 1970 parallel time. You get Megan Todd, who discovers her in first. You get the book of William Hollinshead Loomis, The Life and Death of Barnabas Collins, because he married Josette and he has a son named Bramwell. What did you think of 1970 parallel time? Ladies, you first.
Well, of course, like everybody else says, I cannot believe we got Barnabas not being Barnabas, for one.
Well, this was 1970, though.
Oh, just kidding. I'm way far ahead. But, go ahead.
Okay.
I was talking about something else.
I got really invested in it, especially when the three of us went on Terror of Collinwood to discuss it, and just to see Lara Parker play a nice girl for once, and but we couldn't enjoy it because we didn't trust her. We were like, is she Angelique? So we couldn't. I personally couldn't trust her.
You're just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, waiting for the shoe to drop. And by all means, it looks like she is not Alexis Stokes. It looks like she is Angelique, and
it feels like you've cheated yourself a little through this whole period because you're too worried about Angelique that
to enjoy
you
that
even
it's Alexis.
enjoy it.
And
really
setting Quentin Collins up as the murderer, making him very obviously the murderer, and he so was not.
Mm-hmm.
That killed me. That beat off. Mm-hmm. And Roger Collins coming out as the murderer at the end was just like, what?
And by the time you can accept Alexis, I'm in the right time, right? By the time you can accept Alexis for who she is, Angelique has traded places.
Yeah.
It's like,
but the fact that
I'm over it.
This Angelique wasn't our Angelique from night. This woman was a descendant of our Angelique.
An actual descendant.
The fact that this woman was purely human, but still so dastardly and still so evil, I think maybe a little more dastardly and a little more evil than our Angelique, because our Angelique actually did have human emotions, did feel love. This one did not. This one loved Angelique and nobody else. There might have been a little bit of love there for Hoffman. I don't know. I feel like it was maybe
only because she was her Willie woman. She could been Stokes.
Right, exactly. And yeah.
Everybody's got one.
My opinion.
Gordon?
I enjoyed Parallel Time. I think it was a good way to granted they because of a bunch of them were making the movie, I think it was a good way to generate storylines that weren't necessarily dependent on people playing the same roles. And it kind of has the same effect as, like 1897 or 1795. It's like, okay, Louis, you're playing Roger, but you're playing him this way.
Yes, definitely.
I love the fact that, there's not only the Angelique issue, but I kind of, there's a really there's a warm place in my heart for the Cyrus Longworth John Yeager storyline.
Oh God, yeah.
Because part of it is I'm not sure you could have done it in the prime timeline without it having be like somehow. I think for some reason it fits better in parallel time for me than it would in the prime timeline. But
I would agree with that.
I also like the fact that they had the guy at the vision mixer like, oh, what does this switch do? Because it gets really trippy. It's the visuals are just, I don't know if he was like dropping acid, but if he was, good on him.
Kind of felt that way.
It's like, can you imagine Cyrus Longworth with the technology and equipment that Hoffman had in 1963?
Yeah.
He created a Jekyll and Hyde, damn it. Yes. Like, can you imagine?
Could you imagine him with Eric Lang? That would be real.
They would have created a monster.
Mentor.
Oh, see, that's how you would do Cyrus Longworth in the prime timeline. You have him as a protege of Eric Lang.
Yes.
And he's like, putting bodies together. He was crazy, but turning into an evil man, that's good.
Totally.
Patrick?
Timothy Stokes looks like he's managing a chain of peep stores throughout the Eastern Seaboard. with that cigarette and that thin mustache, you know, the hair slicked over.
Ironically, that's how Thayer David won the role he got in Rocky.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I mean, he is the sleaziest looking character. He's the most versatile actor on the show because he goes from being the classiest character, Professor Stokes, to literally his just sleazy, malodorous twin in every sense.
Okay, Patrick, a quick question.
Yes.
Who's sleazier, Parallel Time Timothy Stokes or Matthew Morgan?
Oh, Stokes, because Stokes knows better. Stokes could be better. He chooses to have that pencil-thin mustache. Okay. You know, Matthew Morgan just, you know, he's just, his blood flows with kickapoo joy juice. He's just, God only knows what the guy's problem is. So, this story, Damian Edwards' pantsuit, I love that. He rated B. Arthur's wardrobe, and there it is. B. Arthurian studies. Why don't we have that? So beyond that, though, I really I have some tough times with this storyline. The things I really liked in it, I like Julia killing Julia.
Classic.
That is her most stone cold moment, and I love it. It's like that's where she really emerges as the hero of 1840. Yes. She is like, I'm auditioning for the part now.
Yes.
Am I good to go? She is just beyond good and evil. She's great. I really like the fact that Barnabas goes back to save a Maggie he doesn't even know. What a guy. What a guy. Seriously. Yeah. You know what? We should all be like that. And I really have such strong feelings for the work of Chris Pennock and for its breadth and the fact that I think the problem with with John Yeager is not that John Yeager is too unlike the rest of the world, but he's stuck in a world that's too unlike him. And that he, if he had the right stimuli, would be like he'd have a wonderful weekend in New York. Imagine him in a good mood where things are just going his way.
Totally.
My God, he is just this force of nature. And one of the first things that I keyed in on was something Pennock called the freedom and pure joy of evil, and that's what he keyed in on. That he is beyond Judeo-Christian inhibitions, and you know what? We're both headed for the grave, so that's enough of a limit. I'm not going to have any more limits. I'm just gonna go there, and philosophically, I really mean philosophically, that is a bold statement. That takes the stuff from the Star Trek episode The Enemy Within, where Kirk needs the decisiveness of the evil side. And instead of looking at it as these are two things that should be kept separate, no, these are two things that should be integrated. And that I think it just continues to look at that element. This is someplace where I think Matthew Hall was watching a lot of Star Trek original series, and I think Sam was there with him, because you've got The Enemy Within and Mirror Mirror both kind of going on at the same time. The other really important thing is that the social missions of Dark Shadows were not bold and explicit, but I do think they were there. And I think one of the things that had to be on the minds of these writers, who were of a different socioeconomic class than their audience, they were not middle American housewives, is that they were dealing with an audience they knew was oppressed. I think that they were coming from a world where women had much more of a recognized place at the table, you know, being in the New York art scene as the writers were, and they realized that their audience wasn't, and that there was a lot of sadness that existed in these homes, and that these husbands were often terrible people, and that I think several times, I think we also see it with Morgan, but we very much see it with Quentin, is that he is the monster of parallel time, of 1970 parallel time. You know, the rest are just these fictional goblins, and who cares? But an overprivileged, rich, handsome, you know, sexy, persuasive man of that era had a wonderful temptation to become a bully, and to think that he has every right to scream and yell and be as temperamental as he wants, and that everyone else has to roll over and take it. And I don't care what he's gone through. PTSD over Angelique only explains so much. And to me, the show, because it doesn't have to go there, always stops short of him just slapping Maggie up one side and down the other, because you just look at him and you know that's where he wants to go, especially in the episode where she leaves him, which to me is the best acted episode in the entire series. And Catherine Lee Scott gives a performance in that episode that is unlike anything else she did up to that point. It is so real. I mean, I feel like I'm watching her doing a final at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts where she really lets it rip.
Yeah.
With a good script. And I just feel it so much. And I feel, you know, because she had to know some classmates who wound up in Robbinsdale with some husbands who were not Ben Martin, and who were jerks, and, you know, drunken, you know, farmers, God knows what else, who probably treated their wives not so great. And that had to, it just had to be on her mind a little bit. And so that element of Quentin being the real monster there is the part that is very important to me. And it's very important. I think it was important to the writers. They couldn't do too much because it's not a show about domestic abuse in that sense, but it's there. And I'm glad the show went there.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, I recently wrote an academic paper about time travel in Dark Shadows used as a way to show the impact of trauma on generations. So basically, if Barnabas's vampirism leads to the breakup of the decline in 1840, and it gets transmitted through. With this particular parallel time storyline, even though Barnabas is not the cause of the trauma, and since you don't have that trauma on the Collins family, the trauma isn't experienced by the Collins family. They're the perpetrators of it. And I think this is a storyline that really shows it's not Quentin who's suffering the consequences. It's Maggie who's suffering the consequences of whatever is going on in the Collins family that led them on that path.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What you really have here too is the OG Jack Torrance. Jack Torrance was somebody who became so entitled with what he wanted. Quentin was already entitled with what he had and what he was, which was, you know, handsome, rich, pompous billionaire. And he didn't have to account or apologize to anyone, and at least that's how he felt. And here's this woman, Maggie Evans, who is, you know, very down to earth, but at the same time, she's not going to put up with this, someone screaming at her, yelling at her, grabbing her a certain way. She does something very brave. She leaves. And that's what most women should take away from this is you don't have to be in a relationship with an asshole. bottom
Completely.
line.
Some of those scenes, for me personally, I not that I have any like trauma or anything, but just as a woman, some of those scenes with Maggie and Quentin, they were difficult to watch.
Yeah.
It was like, girl, you should have gotten out sooner, And I hate to think that way of Quentin because we all love him, but this specific Quentin, total jerko, total bully. And I agree with you, Patrick. I think that that's where, the writers were trying to go, even though they couldn't go all the way there. I think it was implied.
It's
And
like, I
think
know Quentin, you made Quentin such a likable character.
Yeah.
But you need to understand this is him as well. And it was kind of with Cyrus Longworth too, the way he started treating Sabrina and everything.
Yeah.
Like, because
Elizabeth Ice's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Penny was saying it like because John Yeager, like because of his split personality, because that really was Cyrus.
Yeah.
And like Patrick, you were saying, if he could have just accepted that within himself, he probably could have been a really cool guy and been
instead of separating them,
he could have been a curb at personality person and really been a cool guy.
Well, I mean,
You know what I mean? Like,
and John Yeager in himself was pretty abusive to Buffy too.
yeah.
And I don't want to say the word on the air, but we all knew what happened there.
But if you can't accept that dark side in you, like it comes out worse than what it might be. You know,
And I think go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I'm going to split hairs on something, and I don't know if it's relevant or not, but there is nevertheless a difference between Steve and John. Remember Steve? I think John Yeager kills him. Steve is her boyfriend, Elizabeth Ice's boyfriend, and he's
Right.
Steve. This does not necessarily ennoble anything, but it's interesting to note that when John Yeager acts out and does these things, I think it's because of his natural lusts and desires being stifled. It's his desires being stifled, and he acts back against that. And at least he has desires. Steve seems like his only desire is to harm her.
Very, very
That's his source of pleasure. That John, John just wants to. He's there for business. And and woe be to the person who gets in the way of that priapic pursuit for him. And Steve just seems to be a figure of pure hatred. And so I do feel a weird satisfaction. I do see a difference between the two men, and I'm not really bothered when John really goes after Cyrus. Or who the hell am I talking about now? John goes after Steve. It's late.
I'm following you.
What? What'd I do?
I'm just following you.
I'm with you.
I'm with you. Gordon, what do you say about it?
I was about to say, I'm trying to remember. If I remember the storyline correctly, Cyrus's goal wasn't to let this evil out. He wanted to, so much as he wanted to push himself being all good. And it's and I think it kind of reminds me of the original novel of Jekyll and Hyde, where the idea was when Hyde first appears, he's not this big hulking guy. He's really small and shriveled. And he's, and Jekyll's like the powerful one. And as the novel progresses, Hyde gets more powerful. And Hyde becomes the more dominant. And I think the storyline is trying to hit the same theme of, you may think these are two separate, but they're not. As Patrick said, they have to interact.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
I think there's a really great realization at the end of Cyrus Longworth's life because in parallel time, we actually have electricity in the old house. He picks up the phone, calls Barnabas, and says, "Hey, come here. Maggie's here." He knows he's going to die, and he'd rather be dead than continue to transform into John Yeager.
Right.
Though he's done a lot of bad because of this, it's his last, literally his last redemption, and it's
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah.
1841 parallel time. What did you all think of Mary Cooper as Josette Dupre Collins? Ladies?
Well, Barnabas finally got his happy ending. I mean, it sounds like, he married Josette. He had a son, and but then we get Bromwell, who is a little like Quentin in some
I was going to
ways.
say he's the Quentin of his era, kind of.
like a little like Quentin. Like he's hot-headed. He's
proud,
the black sheep of the family, and it's
prodigal son.
but not because he was a whore, and not because he did bad things to not honor the family name. He was just broke, and the family didn't like that he was broke, and he was still a Collins.
Yeah.
And that was a whole new take on the Collinses. It's like we've never really had a broke Collins before, and a Collins that is shunned from their own family because he has no money, because he lives a simpler life. And it was so strange. And I guess not Angelique, Catherine and Daphne were sisters, and it was a weird time, but I loved it. It kept me hooked, and strange, very strange.
Yeah, well, if Morgan Collins were my cousin, I'd probably be very angry as well.
Yeah. Morgan drove me crazy. I mean, if there was a Collins to dislike, especially in that era, it was Morgan for me. Just meathead. He was the meathead of this time, and it just bugged me.
That's your cue to start defending him.
Go ahead, Joel. What do you got to say about Morgan?
I'll more defend Keith Prentice as James Forsythe. What a performance.
Oh, what a performance.
The fact that when you watch the episode where he's James Forsythe and he finds his sister Sarah's body, and this is where we first get the official first appearance of the ghost of Brutus Collins, Lewis Edmonds, and there's this confrontation. He's not shouting like he was as Morgan. He's talking loud, but he's not screaming at the top of his lungs, but it's still a passionate thing. This goes to show you that if Dark Shadows had continued, Keith Prentice may have been your next Barnabas. It's really, really that good, and it's criminally underrated.
I agree. Like the night and day with those two characters, between Morgan and James Forsythe. I mean, does go to show, the talent on this man, the acting ability on this man. And if the show had continued, I would have liked to have seen him and see what else he could have done,
Yeah. He was very talented.
Gary Cole and Christopher Reeve.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually listened to the director and said, okay, maybe I should lower my voice. That might actually work.
Just taking people laugh at the end of that saga, though, makes me laugh every time.
Well, in every sense, and me and Patrick have been talking about this going through 1841. Keith Prentice is set up to be your antagonist the whole time, and he does everything to do that. I mean, he's very antagonistic. I mean, the moment before he even shouts loudly, he's antagonistic, and you love him in a sense. You love him for it because, hey, here's your heel, but also we have this Brutus who's as a heel as well, and it's 1841 to me is one of the most underrated arcs, and I hope fans go back and rewatch it. That's my biggest takeaway. Is there anything anybody wants to add about our journey into time travel, and parallel time?
I do have one tiny little thing, because I was watching your segment on Barnabas in the show as opposed to Barnabas from the movies. And I can't take credit for this, but it's a theory that I'm going to present here. I can't take credit. My son actually came up with it because he was listening as I was watching your episode on that. He says, what if the Dark Shadows movie, House of Dark Shadows, Night of Dark Shadows, and we even say Tim Burton's film, what if those stories, what if those situations happen, as a result of parallel time because of the ground that Collinwood sits on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean,
it's an excellent point. And I'm like, who are you? He's my kid. That's who he is. But
I would agree on 2 out of 3. I don't want the Burton movie to ever exist.
Well,
yeah,
in a sense, too, it would explain why the houses look different, why the characters, it's not just the characters who are acting different. It's why everything looks different as well. So,
right.
What's your son's name? Give him a shout out.
He's David. David's my son.
David.
David, not David
David
Collins.
is a smart young man.
He is. Named after David Collins.
But I will say, like, coming from our dad, who, was there watching it live with his siblings back in the 60s, like, he did point out with the Tim Burton movie that, I mean, there was certain aspects of it that we wish we could have had in the show. Like, we got to see much more of Collinsport, like the shipyards and, like, stuff like that. And
it's little pieces. I'm trying to find the little victories in this.
I look for the silver linings and everything, but he was right. There's some aspects that we just didn't have because the set didn't allow it or whatever. Yeah. But they could have wrote it a little better.
But I'm going to adopt this theory on the movies. I think it could be.
And I've said it before, like, Tim Burton's kind of got that dark comedic feel to his work, which works with everything. It really does, but
not Dark Shadows.
But Dark Shadows had its own sense of comedy within it already. And it was mostly like sarcasm or like, like there was certain lines in the show that I just burst out laughing because maybe you shouldn't be laughing at it, but you do.
It was hilarious. Yeah.
But to that extreme, it didn't work.
Louis Edmonds as Roger Collins had the nice mix of snark and cattiness and really just, he could really make a line sound more vicious than it was written.
True.
Absolutely.
Professor Stokes was another, I think. Yeah. Like some of the things he said just, oh man.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah.
This goes to show you that, you don't hire a writer who can't write the 2012.
Exactly.
They should. Listen, they had Laura Parker there. They should have handed her a blank piece of paper. Miss Parker, would you please write the Dark Shadows movie? Thank you.
I mean, did you read the book she wrote?
Yeah, for real.
She could have done it. It was like,
right.
We love you, girl.
Though, too, keep in mind in the beginning of Dark Shadows, the original series, we see Roger walking, the docks, and we do see the town. Keep in mind in the 2012 movie, we do see the town, Barnabas walking around the movie theater. We see the cannery. Also in House of Dark Shadows, we do get a brief bar. We get bar scenes. Now we don't get any sort of town shots in Night of Dark Shadows, but hey.
I do agree with House of Dark Shadows because, I mean, obviously the budget seemed better on the movie. But yeah, they got us just a little bit further, like with the bar or like at Maggie's house or wherever she was with Roger in that movie, wasn't she?
But in the revival series.
In the revival.
I
know it all.
This is why we do this together.
Remember, Maggie was Ben and Roger in the revival. That's all you need to.
Revival.
I guess we're not talking about that. So
not on this one. No, we'll do that next weekend, baby.
I guess real quickly while I'm thinking about it, I don't even know if I have an answer myself. But if the show had like one more year in it, is there something that they didn't cover, that in your opinion, that they could have done? I don't even know if I have an answer myself.
There's a couple things. There's the Mummy. There's, to me now, something I would have loved to see them cover personally because I'm a fan. The original cat people. If you're gonna have werewolves, have cat people. Okay. I'm a huge Val Lewton fan. Mark, whatever you want to say, call me. I walked with a zombie. Also, Isle of the Dead. There's things they could have done.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I could easily see if they had decided to continue on in 1840 parallel time, easily doing a version of Hound of the Baskervilles where that final shot, instead of the Thayer David narration, the window's open, you see two red lights, like about eye level, and then you hear the werewolf growl.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
And then what you also then you combine that with a mystery where 1840 parallel time trask is like, hey, we found a dead body that looks like me on your estate. What's the deal? And then when you go back, and I also think you could, if you headed back to prime time, there's a lot of occult detective literature. So William Hope Hodgson had a character named Carnacki. C. Barry Quinn had a story called character called Jules de Grandin, who it's a detective who investigates kind of weird happenings, and either they're supernatural or they're rational. And I think giving Stokes that kind of positioning, maybe have him and he and Julia kind of play that role together. So you're doing the X-Files before you're doing the X-Files.
Yes. Yes.
To sort of put a modern day take on the werewolf, don't be afraid to channel The Howling, where you have somebody come up to Quentin Collins and they look like this normal person or a human being. You were a werewolf. And Quentin's like, wait, how do you know that? You need the moon to change. No, I don't need the moon. And you see the hand change. There's no moon. It's towards broad daylight. The Howling did this beautifully. Don't be afraid to use it.
Okay.
Prime timeline, you have James Storm come as another is a cousin from England. And he's actually from the British. There actually is an English branch of the family, and he's like, there's no Barnabas in our family. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yes. I would have loved to have seen that.
I like that. Yeah.
Does anybody want to add anything before we go? Are we good?
I'm good.
I'm good.
First of all, let me thank my guests, Christine, Cara. Thank you both. Gordon, thank you. Patrick, thank you, my friend. All of you, thank you. You all did a fabulous.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you.
It's always fun. Thank you.
Yes, it's always a pleasure.
So, what do you guys want to discuss next weekend? You guys can pick the topic. We'll all come back next Friday.
We're doing this because we're unemployed, and you know that we're never available.
Get me while you can.
I'm gonna book you till oblivion, ladies.
That's cool.
Oh my gosh, what can't we talk about?
What haven't we talked about?
We haven't talked about the 1991 revival. We could talk about that, or we could talk about the beginning of Dark Shadows. What do you want to discuss?
Or I'll throw it out there, Joel. Maybe we could finally do our Widow's Hill retrospect.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Widow's Hill. We'll all do Widow's Hill together.
Done.
Because my favorite location is Widow's Hill.
Wait. What are we doing again?
Widow's Hill.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about Widow's Hill.
Joel has been begging us for this for a year, so it's time. It's time.
That happened.
Yes. Ask my wife. When I beg, I hug legs. I grasp tightly. No.
Okay. Boy, I'm glad I'm not near you. I'm just saying it out loud right now.
Links to Christen Cara's YouTube channel. Links to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page. Link to the Dark Shadows Day book Unbound. You all enjoy your weekend. Patrick, I'll see you Sunday night.
Yes.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.